just in time for Black History Month, Black Lives Matter Week, whatever you want to call it. It's Bronzebird here with another video. Please make sure you like and subscribe for this goodness I'm going to show you today. So my thing about it is, if you've been on my channel for a long time, you know that I'm primarily an antagonist against the Black the Black Lives Matter movement, in which I've made a series of videos, especially ones I label as a series called Pro-Liberal Blacks, in which we tackle the issues about so-called blackness in America, the tropes, the problems, and all these different things. Now, the thing about it is, I remember doing a presentation way back, I believe last year, where I detailed that they're sending in 13 principals or to the likes of that into the schools so that children can learn about what the Black Lives Matter is teaching, which aligns itself with liberalism and communism. Something that was drawn up by Karl Marx in 1848. So the idea of this is already, you have a lot of people who, well, you have a good amount of so-called Black people who is against Black Lives Matter, and they understand that Black Lives Matter has done nothing with helping so-called Black children. All it has is minister themselves with aligning with other liberalism movements, such as the LGBTQ community and feminism, or whatever that rhetoric is. Now, the ironic thing is, when you look at their website, they're always going to feature a so-called Black woman. They will never feature a so-called Black man. And their whole entire thing is that they always say that they want to destroy a nuclear family because it's about destroying the patriarchy. They see the man as a threat in society, especially you, so-called Black man. Even though you're at the bottom of the totem pole, shoot, we all are, right? We're at the bottom of the totem pole. And so they institute this idea that destroying the patriarchy is the way. Single motherhood should be worshiped. It should be a good thing, not a bad thing. So they obviously take the idea of the proponents of like being raised by a single mother out of the question, a lot of psychological issues, a lot of different things that is missed by especially a so-called Black boy when the father is not in the home, whether willingly or unwillingly. So I'm going to touch on this video. They have 13 new proponents or principles, I believe they put in this year. And I guess they're going to be doing 13 new principles every year, especially when it comes to the school system, and especially the cesspool of liberalism, which would be the public school system. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you guys get an idea of what I'm talking about. There's a critic that's making an argument against BLM because they just purchased a communist building in Canada. And we already knew that. We already knew they was involved in real estate and all these different things and stuff like that. We're not sure what they're going to do with it, but at the end of the day, we understand what their game is about. So check this out. Fair use.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Well, who's leading Black Lives Matter and controlling their $60 million bank?
And before I begin, that video that was first playing on that screen, I also have a presentation of that on my YouTube channel you guys could watch.
Well, new reporting seems to show that no one really knows. Instead, public records reveal that BLM transferred millions of dollars to a charity to purchase a Canadian mansion once owned by the Communist Party.
Now, y'all might get mad and be like, well, you know, where is that money going to? It's not going. But again, look at exactly what it says. BLM donated millions to buy communist mansions. Now, y'all remember way back, it was that so-called Black woman that got in trouble for having like 3 or 4 houses in California and stuff like that. And then the fact of the matter is, she said on an interview that the Black Lives Matter is a trained Marxist group. Remember that, right? So the thing about it is, yes, it makes perfect sense why they would donate that money. I feel sorry for a lot of you guys that's trying to donate because you really think Black Lives Matter is going to be a good cause for so-called Black people, but it's only putting y'all in the victimhood mentality, and they're marketing that victimhood mentality to go ahead and purchase and conjure up some type of cult-like fixture when they buy these communists or whatever type of houses that is, mansions, such as this one in Canada.
Here with more is spokesperson for Color Us United, Christian Watson. Christian, welcome to Fox and Friends. So I'm a little bit confused here. How is buying a mansion in a predominantly white neighborhood in Canada helping alleviate racial justice in the United States of America?
It has nothing to do with it, my dear. It doesn't matter about it being in a so-called white neighborhood. It matters about the fact of the matter they're trying to align themselves with so-called white people. That's why when a lot of these pro-blacks talk, they're just talking the talk. They want to sit up there and say, we want to go against the white man. No, no, no. You want to be just like the white man. A lot of these pro-blackity blacks, they do that. And I notice that's the reason when you get out of those community conversations quickly, when you have a plan as a so-called black man to build with those that want to build with you, that's why I say the individual mindset is important first. Because pro-blackity blacks will be on that time that they care what the so-called white person has to say, even though they try to despise it and say, we don't care what they think. No, you do.
Well, it's not. And Black Lives Matter's lack of transparency should be concerning to anyone who genuinely does care about Black lives. But this, Rachel, underscores a broader problem within Black Lives Matter. And that problem is that Black Lives Matter's ideology actually does not help a single inner city kid at all. It teaches them that they are victims to things they cannot control, and then goes ahead to say to fix that, they have to be radical activists for the political left. This is against the sober advice of men like Booker T. Washington, who encourage Black folks to perfect themselves and their communities and those they love, as opposed to trying to change the world.
And it should be in the hands of the so-called black man first, not the so-called black woman. And especially because you had 3 so-called black lesbians. That's the charge of the movement, getting funding from a so-called white man. You understand me? Like, a lot of people miss the mark. And it's so sad to see brothers that's involved in Black Lives Matter movement look like complete feminine men, sitting up there talking about see, when they get up on these interviews or argue with random so-called white women or so-called white men and try to sit up there and say, for 400 years because of slavery, like, and I don't laugh because I understand slavery happened. I understand the hardships that happen with so-called black people. I mean, hell, I understand the experience. But at the same time, when do you sit there and stop pointing the finger and start looking at yourself, especially as so-called black people? Especially so-called black men, because the so-called black men is not taken seriously in the black community, that is. We already know that. That's why they conjure up the so-called black woman, because they want to give her the belief that she can get shit done, when in reality, all she's doing is causing a lot of confusion and a lot of disarray within the whole entire community bracket there is. That's why they want to give power to the so-called black woman. That's one of the reasons. I know there's more reasons than that, but still.
So perhaps Black Lives Matter should fix its own backyard and get its own stuff in order before trying to supposedly save Black folks.
Yeah, and maybe the corporations that tried to buy some sort of absolution, racial absolution, by giving millions of dollars to BLM should be held responsible, or in the very least call for some transparency. Now, next week, Christian, is BLM week in many public schools. Now, to be clear, these schools are saying, well, it's not sponsored by BLM, but we're just using the principles of Black Lives Matter.
That's BS.
You just gave a case for why Black Lives Matters doesn't empower Black people. What do you think about public schools holding BLM week?
Well, if you go to the Black Lives Action things website, which is where they're laying out what they're going to be doing in public schools, it's all built on a lie. It's built on the idea that bills that have been passed to combat critical race theory, which is a divisive and anti-American ideology, it's also an anti-intellectual ideology as well, are somehow trying to stymie conversation about racial justice, when in all reality, the Texas bill actually says, which is one of the more ferocious of these bills, says that it's important to talk about white supremacy and slavery and the Klan, but we cannot do it from a standpoint
critical race theory
of demeaning someone for something they didn't do. You can't say that someone who is white or someone who is Black has any responsibility for what someone who looked like them did. So, you know, it's just, the principles are just as bad as the organization, in my opinion.
And that's the end of the video, but I mean, you obviously know how these things is gonna go. And I just wanna show you really quickly something else that I picked upon from going back into the Black Lives Matter website, in which they're also going to go ahead and always and initiate some type of plan or week of action every single year. And this is what they plan on doing. I'm not sure if they've been doing this since 2013, but I definitely picked up on this last year. So I definitely want to make sure that this year we take a look at it and see the poison they're putting in these schools, that these schools allow anyway, because it's a cesspool for liberalism. But, you know, we got to touch on this so we can have an understanding. My whole entire idea about it is get your child out of that nonsense Black Lives Matter lifestyle quickly. Marching and do all this nonsense. Teach your children the real history about your people. You understand me? And they're not going to teach that in public school, Catholic school, or whatever, because it's under that jurisdiction. You got to buy the books for your child so they can have an understanding of where they come from. But let's read this together, shall we? Who we are. Black Lives Matter at School is a national coalition organizing for racial justice in education. We encourage all educators, students, parents, unions, and community organizations to join our annual week of action during the first week of February each year. What's new? Keep track of the latest updates, including news, resources, year of purpose, and how to get involved. Lawmakers in at least 27 states are attempting to pass legislation that would require teachers to lie to students. Of course, they're going to use that whole entire big word lie and about all that other stuff to make it seem as if it's going against their agenda. Now watch this. See how it already has the liberalism in this? And the so-called black man, I just don't understand how you guys partake in this. You have no reason aligning yourself into affairs that's actually for your detriment, not for your help, for your detriment. About the role of racism, sexism, heterosexual sexism, and oppression throughout U.S. history. In response, educators across the United States are signing a pledge to teach truth. What truth? That has to deal with y'all talking about liberalism and all these different things y'all talk about in school now. You know, whenever, especially when it comes to quote unquote gender, about how there's more than one, and about how, you know, people who don't identify by the binary of male and female should be represented. Yeah, that's true for right. To raise public awareness about the danger of these bills, we invite educators to make that pledge public in gatherings nationwide, August 27th to 29th, 2021, sponsored by Zen Education Project, coordinated by Teaching for Change and Rethinking Schools. Black Lives Matter at School and African American Policy Forum. And of course, they're gonna go ahead and use Assata Shakur, who was reportedly a so-called lesbian, in order to make their statements upholding and true. I'm not gonna read it, but you guys can check it out. There is something I also did see. Look at this. See this? Now I want you to take a look at what is it that's going on right here. This is Year of Purpose 2022. Save the dates. Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action, January 31st to February 4th. Today would be the last day then. More info, www.blacklivesmatteratschool.com. Join the movement. A week of action, a year of purpose, a lifetime of practice. And notice what they have right here, a so-called black woman when it comes to Black Lives Matter. Why is that when it comes to so-called black woman that she's being the led or the head of when it comes to blackness? You understand? Black girls matter, black girls rock. You know what I mean? You see this, why don't they ever put a so-called black man in there? The closest so-called black man they'll have is someone like Shaun King, who's a so-called white boy. A week of action, a year of purpose, a lifetime of practice. Again, it's already putting this a repetition. But I want to show you this video real quick to tell you how sad it is that they doing this to our people, man. I don't fall for the okie doke. You know I don't play when I come over here. You understand me? So check this video out with me. I'm not sure what the tenements would be for 2022, but I'll research it right here. So I'm gonna just show you really quickly. Hold on a sec. Fair use.
What is happening in our schools today is heartbreaking.
This is one of the racist rants discovered Monday at Oak Park River Forest High School.
Our kids are being called the N-word. We have white students who think it's okay to come to school for Halloween with KKK masks.
1 point.
Well, I mean, honestly, when it comes to those, it's different factors when it plays into what that lady said. Yeah, there is definitely racism that happens in these schools where so-called white dudes or sit up there and make it their business to be racist towards a so-called black child. I understand that, and especially if, depending on the community, are you willing to put your child through that? You know, there's so many, there's so many, parents out there that feel it's their business to take their child out of the neighborhood that they're at, or try to go into a white community that is, and then put them in an all-white school and be surprised that so-called white students is being racist towards a so-called black student. I mean, again, there's a lot of components that come into that, but that's just something I need to bring up.
6 million children in this country go to a school where there's a police officer but no counselor.
Educators in Washington State are 90% white.
I'm not getting the education that I need as a black male.
The people who have done the conquering.
I'm sorry to tell you, when it comes to these schools, they're not trying to educate so-called black men on who they are. You understand? They want to give you a brushing of history. They don't want you to dig deep. They don't want you to know that all that. They want you to get suckered into the teaching about slavery, because slavery keeps you in the mindset of victimhood. So that when you go outside, every time you see a so-called white person, you'll sit up there and look at that so-called white person and say, your people had me enslaved. Your people had me in shackles and chains and all this other stuff. You understand me? That's usually what happens. See, when you go ahead and you start to learn stuff for yourself, or you start looking at other teachings, you have a different outlook. But if you want to stay in that slavery mindset, that's on you, because they don't want to see they don't want you to see the greatness in so-called black people, the things they've done. Yeah, they'll tell you about the 40 acres and the mule story, and about how y'all fought in Civil War, or y'all fought in World War I, especially that happened after the Harlem Renaissance, about how they had that all black military, that was a 369 infantry and all that other stuff. They'll tell you about that because it's no problem, because it's still about trying to align themselves with white validation. But as long as they keep you under that spell, you will never move forward, especially from the Black Lesbian Matters movement. Excuse me, Black Lives Matter.
Have been the ones that we've been lauding in school.
Kobe, who's in the 9th grade at Pearland High School, was studying immigration when he read this in his textbook, a comment that referenced African slaves as workers.
All I ever see is us being slaves, Like, why don't you ever teach me, how we fought back? Because I know my people are strong.
A referee at a high school wrestling match in New Jersey told a wrestler he had to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit the match.
I see people around me who are hurt, and it is wrong to not speak up.
Black Lives Matter.
And by the way, it's also been said that when you guys are throwing up the black fist, that has to also deal with communism. I'll try to touch on that probably at a later date, if not this year, next year. I have no idea, but we're going to do some more research on that, so you have an understanding of a lot of these symbols that so-called black people dare to put up, especially when they put up the fist, especially when it's something infamously known from Black Panther Party.
School is a declaration that black students deserve to be taught the truth and that their lives have value.
It gives students, not only of color, but of other races and ethnicities, a chance to see different cultures.
We have lessons for every single day, Monday through Friday. So there's about 2 to 3 principles per day that are connected.
And look at how sad that is. I want y'all to pay attention to that stuff that you just seen on your screen. If this is supposed to be about quote unquote black lives, why are they talking about bringing other nations into y'all business? See, I thought the whole entire idea about Black Lives Matter is supposed to be about exclusivity, being exclusive to one particular group, not being inclusive and then allowing all other nations to be involved. See, that's the confusing thing about the quote unquote Black Lives Matter movement, or just a good amount of the pro-blackity blacks in general. You say that it's supposed to be directly for black people, but then you want to offer your whole entire thing of other ideologies, other people coming in, other nations to come in, and all these different things, which comes along with the whole entire globalist mindset. See, and this is why I keep telling so-called black men, get out of that movement. I mean, Even in my own personal life, I've had full-on arguments with people who disagreed with me, and they sat there and said, well, you know, Bronzebird, you're a coon, you're this, you're that, because my opinions stayed the way that they are. They was very much in a disagreement with exactly the whole entire rhetoric with this bullshit movement was sitting up there putting upon your damn people. And this is exactly what it's like, man. They will never, ever, ever, ever have you think for a second that they are for you. You are the base. And especially you so-called black man, you are the sacrifice for the Black Lives Matter or the so-called black community. You are the sacrifice. They will love the so-called black woman to be ahead of you. And I know that hurts for people to hear that, but it's the truth.
We participated in this last year, and a lot of feedback we got from educators who have never really experienced ethnic studies in the classroom was that their students were more engaged in this content than they had ever seen before.
I learned so much through that really empowered me as a black man. This is probably the first time I really was excited about school. You know, it's something that I'm passionate about now.
Yes, this is from 2019, but I also want to do one more thing before I get out of here. So, week of action. So I want you to check this out. So this is something I researched a little bit earlier. See how this has the couple of things. Black Lives Matter at school. That's the research. That's the one we just came up with, right? Not a good one, but so you guys get the real point of what I'm trying to preach here, what I'm talking about today. You know, more of the websites is going to be touching on the real rhetoric and all that other stuff, but see, it already tells you exactly what their week of action is. Week focuses on themes such as restorative justice, which is more or less trying to get you know, a pat on the back from the so-called white man or the powers that be in society. Empathy, love engagement, which would probably align to the whole entire thing about free love and, you know, all that stuff about gender non-exclusivity or whatever the hell that is, diversity and globalism, which is something I already talked about. See that? I mean, even if you look at the whole entire thing of what they're saying, everything starts to align. You understand me? This is everything starts to align. You get it, right? Everyone is welcome. All this bullshit. You understand? This is why I do this, because I want brothers to have a clear conscience. Take your children, especially if you're a so-called black man that's a father, take your son out of this bullshit. You understand me? Take your child, take your so-called black son out of this bullshit. It's not gonna help your men, your brothers or your sons become a better man. You understand me? It's not helping your sons. It's only poisoning your sons. We should be teaching our children of the right history, not this bullshit that Black Lesbian Matters keeps sitting up there talking about, because they're not out here for the best interest of so-called black people. They want to go ahead and pander to have so-called white validation and understand themselves under communism, okay? So I'm going to be touching on more of that other stuff maybe this week, next week. We'll get into it. Otherwise than that, peace.